they've been the very first successful indigenous in the world to be able to actually take the profits and disconnect from everything and be self-sustaining and then thrive to the point where they have enough money where they actually bought back some of the land that was not indigenous, but it's wholly owned by indigenous, and then turned it into a reservation. So they've reversed the flow. So here with Buenos Aires, with the Cabacar tribe, we want to do the same thing. And we're just telling them, look, it's already been done by indigenous, around the world already. You just have to implement the same type of stuff, so it's not too scary. Henry Ford was a hemp farmer, ran 40,000 cars off of 10,000 acres. We're not going back to the future. We're going future to the back. We're becoming low-tech rednecks.
Mini Ice Age Conversations podcast. It's about observing cycles, sharing insights, and solving problems together by combining historical, climate, food, and economic data so you can make informed decisions as we shift into a new era. Here's what was, this is what's coming. Our world is never going back to 2019, so what will the new era look like? And most importantly, what is immediate that will affect the pocketbook and the outlook into next year so we can all get ready? Thank you for joining. I'm your host, David Dubine. And good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for spending your valuable time right here with the Adapt 2030 channel. As always, trying to bring you the newest thoughts, ideas. Now, remember, over the last couple of years, I've been following the Hydrogen on Demand project with Tom Ross from Tesnick. And as we spoke about before, there was a full test project going on down in Costa Rica at the Hot Springs Valley area with Hydrogen on Demand with the dirt bikes and the dirt bike racing and this sort of thing. So I have somebody from down there that's on the ground right there that's going to give us an update. Got Drew with me. Now, this whole shift from technology has now turned into a bug out spot because they had an area in Chiripo, indigenous lands, that they were testing this because it was outside of what quote unquote government control. So this is such the interesting story on how people who are visiting now aren't even going to a tourism. They're taking their money to set up new locations, but then we got this new technology and bring in hempoline. And I think this is going to be a great conversation. So just to try to frame it in reference here, we're talking about behemoth corporations trying to, again, stomp on emerging technologies. And in the last update, when I was talking with Tom, he was saying that they were going to move forward and they had all this government support and everything with hydrogen on demand technologies, and there was no need for storage any longer. And then suddenly, whoosh, it stops. And this is where the story picks up, because now they're only able to and are actively testing down in Costa Rica. So Drew, thanks for joining me. Just curious, there's so many facets of things happening right now with your company, your project down there, but in general around the planet. So give us a fill in. What's the shift of technology, and why did the hydrogen project stop in Canada is more than the main question here. Like, what kind of interference was up there? And how safe do you really feel, doing your test, hydrogen on demand with the company down in Costa Rica? Do you feel there'd be any government interference there, even though you're on indigenous lands? Because when we come to disruptive technologies and energy, it seems there's nowhere to run, nowhere to hide on the planet, period. Floor is yours.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for having me on. And what shifted is that Costa Rica doesn't make oil and doesn't make cars. And they have a new president that came in March, and he's more in line with what we're looking to do. And being on a reservation, there's no building permits, there's no taxation. The cryptocurrency we're working with, it's based on longitude, latitude, IP address, MAC address for point of acceptance. So you don't have the securities, you don't have the taxation because of where it's physically located, because it's the point of acceptance for cryptocurrency.
Bloomberg is warning of a severe economic reset, and gold appears as the caged bull waiting a catalyst. JP Morgan warned, cut stocks, buy gold, and hold your cash. Wells Fargo said gold is in a super cycle that could last another 6 years. And worst case scenario, gold at 3,000. It's as simple as calling Patriot Gold Group today. Find out why they're A+ rated, Consumer Affairs top rated gold and silver company nationwide. Patriot Gold Group offers the no fee for life IRA, where your IRA or 401k can be in physical gold or silver on qualifying rollovers. 888-546-7020. Call to get your free investor guide today. And now on with the video.
So it's just many things that it rolled into. And I have to thank you very, very much, because we have so many people down here now that have cleared land and have built places, and they were looking at being part of the community, helping out with the project, but now they're liquidating everything and moving here. A lot of Canadians, a lot of Americans, and without going into all the reasons, most people already know. All you have to do is just take a little bit look at the news. We could go on for hours about why we're not there in Canada anymore. There's multiple reasons. Obviously, you can only get so far because there is an automotive industry up there. There is definitely an oil industry up there. So when you talk about reducing the consumption of oil, then that's going to be a challenge. So down here, the environment just has been so much better for us, so much more accepting. So it just ended up morphing into this project. It didn't intend it to, but now it's become this restaurant at the edge of the universe to watch it all blow up in the VIP section. Everybody's coming here because the low cost of living, perfect climate, perfect water, hot springs, valley, indigenous, very diverse farm, off-grid with electricity, with 3 different sources of redundancy, with the hydrogen and biofuel and used motor oil. It's all become this mixed, and all these people have come to us from your podcast. So we've got a mechanical engineer, we've got a mechanic, we've got machinists, we've got a lot of ex-military, a lot of ex-cops, RCMP, a whole bunch of military guys showed up, and we're like, wow, this is freaky. Healthcare professionals, a lot of people in the trades, all showing up. Everybody just kind of went, what are you doing down there? They came to visit, and then all of a sudden they're just like, wow. They thought it was going to get better after the COVID, but it got worse. So they just decided they wanted to switch. So the hydrogen, what happened is that for the hydrogen, to make hydrogen work with newer vehicles, you have to interface with the computer. And we ended up having that have some challenges. So what we did was we added the start-stop motor. So when your car goes to come to a full stop, and then you want to be, and it turns the engine off, and then it turns it back on really quickly to save gas and emissions. So that you can add a battery and a controller to, which we did. And it's the same controller and the same technology and the software that we built with the ASI controllers to be able to interface with that. So what happens is you turn into a mild hybrid. So every time you go to take off at a stoplight, the electric motor will come on, and then that will take care of the, what you need to take off. And you get regenerative braking, which gives you electricity to be able to run the hydrogen reactor to create the hydrogen oxygen. And the hydrogen oxygen is just a catalyst to take you from like 60% to over 80% fuel efficiency. What it does is it takes you like regular fuel to like premium fuel, in fact, way beyond that. So that's what, and it cleans up your emissions quite a bit. So we have all the testing here in Costa Rica with the government on multiple cars to show all that stuff and fleets of vehicles down here. The next thing we wanted to do was to get, we wanted to go for a 10x reduction. So that's where we are now. So 10 times less. So equivalent to 50 cents a gallon. So how we do that is we reduce the volume of fuel by using the hydrogen and oxygen to be able to get more of the fuel to actually burn to get higher efficiency. So right there, there's a 50%. But when you use a mixture of like used motor oil and vegetable oil that's been in fryers and stuff, and then you combine it with hemp oil, because the other thing that happened here is hemp became legal since we spoke last here in Costa Rica. And a friend of mine's been lobbying for 12 years and actually wrote the laws that actually got passed. That's one of the former presidents, the president Pepe, that won the Nobel Peace Prize for abolishing the army down here and putting all the money into healthcare and education. It's his grandson that created the hemp laws and lobbied for them and passed them. So now we're in an environment where it's the least costly and the best to be able to do hemp. In 45 days maximum, you can have a licensed permit here to do hemp. And on the reservation, it's even easier, of course, because you don't have building permits and taxation and a lot of other stuff you have in other places. So now we're going to 10x reduction, because between the mixture of the different fuels and even just strictly on hemp oil alone, we easily can be at equivalent to 50 cents a gallon. And your vehicle lasts longer, runs smoother, much lower emissions, because just by using hemp oil alone, it sequesters the carbon out of the air, then it re-emits it. So it's completely neutral. All we did was combine the technologies. So the FEV, plug-in electric hybrid. So you have a plug-in hybrid kit that goes on, and it complements the hydrogen, because where the hydrogen's weak, the electric is strong, and vice versa. So the combination of that and then using biofuels. So that's what we've set up down here. And now we're pleasantly surprised to get a 10x reduction. So anytime you have a 10x reduction, if you look that up in business, you change everything. You change everything in the world. Think about the economics of the world. How much of your food and everything that comes to you, it's probably 50% is the price of energy. So if you can reduce that by 10x, that changes the economy of the world. So since we were on last time, we were overwhelmed, decided to just plow into it. And now we've got truckers and farmers from all over the world saying, we want you to help us to enable and empower us to be able to socially and economically uplift the world by going directly to the citizens with biofuel, with our own tankers, with our own food, and they have generators for electricity. So now we can create our own little microeconomies. We can go hyper local, and we can do wireless mesh networks between the vehicles and the buildings to create our own network. So we've got this bubble onto our own. We have our own self-sufficient community that does not have to interact with the rest of the world. Now, if the rest of the world does exist, and whatever it does exist for how long, then you can play that game. But get your base in place first. Get it to a place where you're completely self-sufficient. Like the property we're on here, the only thing we import is salt. That's it. We have bamboo for pipes. We have our own gravel pit. We have our own sand pit. We have water all year round from multiple springs that backs onto the protected rainforest. We're at the headwaters. There's zero contamination. And we're in a deep valley. There's no towns, cities, or farms or anything in our headwaters. And of course, magically, it has a beautiful hot springs here and no volcanoes, which is really bizarre. So we're at 3,000 feet. So there's low humidity. So it's cool at night, but warm during the day, but you don't have that humidity. You're an hour and a half from the fastest growing beach and the fastest growing city in Central America, Avita, Dominical, Ocachao, beautiful beaches. And then you have San Isidro, which is 380,000 people. And then the town next to us here, it's only half an hour from us, is Buenos Aires, which means good air, Costa Rica. And then you have Chiripo, which is just over my shoulder here. And Chiripo is an indigenous word for eternal waters. And then the tribe here is named Kab-E-Kar tribe. Kabakar tribe is how they pronounce it. So we're trying to work with Uber drivers. That's the biggest fleet and the biggest, change you could make in the world, is to reduce their emissions, reduce their cost, and, harness that energy of the fastest and largest growing fleet in the world. Because everybody's getting rid of their second and third car, and even their first car, the only car they have left, has been downsized and using less. So this, this whole thing like Taiwan, where, they've got it to the point where you can have food delivered to your door for less than the cost of the ingredients. So why would you, so they have 80% less kitchens, 80% less restaurants, 80% less grocery stores now. And that happened before COVID, because of a company called Gogoro that had $500 to $1,000 electric scooters, and the batteries were $30 a month to be able to swap. And it's a very fast growing company right now. So we just took that model and merged it, best of breed, best of fit, with what we're doing here. So we swap batteries on vehicles too. And the trouble is they have to swap out those batteries, and batteries are going to be hard to get and getting more expensive. So we just have a little hydrogen biofuel generator that's in there with a much smaller battery with a little capacitor. And then that makes it so they don't have to swap batteries out all day long, or have a facility with all the batteries and all the heat and all the dangers of batteries type stuff. So basically, we've just taken everything, put it all together, and we have all these people join us. The MIT of Central America, Earth University, which is one of the best permaculture universities in the world. We've got students from there that have graduated, that have joined our project. We have people here from every major tech company in the world, whether it be Google or whether it be Tesla or anything type stuff. There's high-level people that have just bugged out and said they've had enough of what's going on and wanted something better. There's a lot of intentional communities that are down here in Costa Rica that I've watched and around the world. And what happens is that they come and then they build fences and barbed wire and security and stuff like that. So at the end of the day, I figure it was better that the guy that won the Nobel Peace Prize here, the president, put all the money in healthcare and education, is to go, how do we help these people to be able to get what they want, so that there's an interdependency, so that we're part of the community. They're getting benefits. There's people coming here for tourism and then coming to buy and to stay. And their first right of refusal to anything we do down here goes to anybody here on the reservation and locally. And they've had the same challenge here they do with Canada. There's a place called Georgina Island, and Georgina Island successfully got rid of the education, got rid of the police, got rid of a lot of things, then monetized honey and a few other things. They've been the very first successful Indigenous in the world to be able to actually take the profits and disconnect from everything and be self-sustaining and then thrive, to the point where they have enough money where they actually bought back some of the land that was not Indigenous, but it's wholly owned by Indigenous, and then turned it into a reservation. So they've reversed the flow. So here with Buenos Aires, with the Cabacar drive, we want to do the same thing. And we're just telling them, look, it's already been done by Indigenous, around the world already. You just have to implement the same type of stuff, so it's not too scary. Let's create some economic development here that works. It's good for the environment, good for you guys, that works for you guys, so you can go buy back your land. And then, cater to the people that are coming here. It's 48 cents a kilowatt hour for electricity out here at the beach, and it's intermittent. So having generators and turning your vehicle into a generator, that's another benefit. Obviously, when we put the PHEV, the plug-in electric hybrid system, where it's the alternator with a battery with a controller, what happens is it reverses. So you can actually use it as a generator, like these, the Ford F-150s being used at job sites to be able to be used for electricity for the job site. So your vehicle instantly has another value proposition. There's another cost benefit, which is to be able to actually have your vehicle is a generator, not just a backup generator. It's decent enough you could run your house easily. And with biofuel and the hydrogen, then you can run it very cost effectively, very environmentally friendly for a very long time. And you can source your fuel locally, which is going to be very important with the geopolitics that are happening today. A long explanation, but that's a little bit of an update.
Well, we like long explanations, and talking about all the problems you had up in Canada and the pushback against the industries that are so entrenched across the planet, for the dailies on our lives. And you mentioned all these high level people, and I think it's almost like they're coming down to watch you in terms of, you got to think about how many are, moles or infiltrators into the program to try to keep an eye on you, because you've made so many waves so far in a dangerous area of the world where so many have gone before and never come back. You look how many free energy devices and inventors of those. Now, keep in mind that, biodiesel cars or diesel vehicles are quite different from gasoline vehicles for those of you in the US, mainly gasoline in the US, but across the world, it's the opposite. Almost every car is a diesel vehicle. There's twofold that I would consider from this here. First, it's on indigenous lands, and with part of the Costa Rican government being part of the World Economic Forum, what is it when they get the orders to say, all right, get everybody out of there and take the land back? What's going to prevent that? Because we're seeing huge agitations and indigenous trampling happening in Brazil at the moment. And there, if you look at the tear gas being thrown around there and the battles raging between the indigenous having their land reconfiscated and reappropriated by the Brazilian government as we speak today. I mean, you look over Twitter, all these raging battles going on down there. It's the same thing. Well, Brazil has been given the order, all right, remove everybody off the land, and we're going to take that land back for some reason. And what's to stop the Costa Rican government from doing the exact same thing? I mean, you got a handful of people up there, and an hour and a half away on a drive is easily one car of, you could get up to that location from the beach in one single tank of gasoline. Like, how do you protect yourself from that? And then the second point on that, growing the hemp. But we saw John Kerry this week come out and say that we have to stop nitrogen emissions across the planet. And also CO2 is such a driver of, they said specifically 33% of all emissions. Now there's that stamp again of 33 across the news articles when it's an approved, movement forward from hierarchies in society. So 33% of all global emissions are from agriculture now. There's a full-on onslaught to now reduce American farm output, and actually Kerry said it, confiscate will be a possibility of American farms like they were doing over in the Europe. We've already seen it happen. These Dutch farmers, you knew it wasn't going to stop there. It is never going to stop. So what's to stop the Costa Rican government from saying, all right, you're growing hemp. Oh, it's too much nitrogen emissions. It's too much this, is too much that. We got to abide by the global policies set forth by some unelected body. And now you need to stop your project, because hemp down here, I should say up here compared to where you are, compared to Canada, in the United States, hemp is, you can grow it as a crop, but I'll tell you from experience here in Tennessee, you have to sign a paper that it gives no knock warrant 24-hour access, not only to your land where you're growing the hemp, but to your home on your land. Now, these are the types of things that I think are unacceptable. If you're going to grow a crop, they don't require the same thing for corn to go into the ethanol plants. But if you're growing hemp for oils, what point do you come away from taking too much market share out of the local hands of oil companies there. You're going to reach some max point of production and you've already stepped on a toe or two, and then there's going to be some repercussions. Just being in a smaller country, accessible pretty much from anywhere in that country by one tank of gas or less. Like, well, how are you protecting yourself from some of these things? Because you mentioned all these huge players. They're not there, in my opinion, most of them, or you could say some of them, to really join you. They're there to watch you and see what kind of progress you're making on this thing. So I see, different layers and different levels of this all spinning in concert together.
No, that's good. So basically, the new president of Costa Rica that came in March, he got kicked out of the World Economic Forum. So that's very important.
Oh, he
Number
did.
two,
Okay.
yeah, he got kicked out. So he asked way too many questions and was asked to leave. That was a huge decider for us. Number two, Costa Rica has the largest microchip plant in the world. So right now, with what's happening with Taiwan, like Elon Musk was just on major news going, and I asked him a question. He repeated it 3 times the exact same way, which was, it is the policy of the Chinese government that Taiwan is theirs. And he repeated it 3 times. And he quoted the Princess Bride, which was, I'm not here for power. I'm not here for money. And of course, he left it to you to look up what that means. The interpretation most people come to is revenge. So it's what most people see today is that you have a civil war of the elites. There's a huge power struggle going on. So Costa Rica also has pledged to be able to become part of the Brics. And since Israel and Saudi Arabia just recently did, and now Germany's in talk because they didn't like the pipeline thing. So we go on for hours. But the bottom line is, you and I both know the Brics and the yen right now are running the table. There's more people, more GDP, more arms with Russia and China getting together. And then, Xi Jinping's doing his little tour of the world, victory tour of pulling all these people together. So, it's no different than Rome. You were very successful because you're a military, and then you got too many bases and too much debt, and then it imploded. So everything has its time. This is not about your team, my country, whatever. It's just this point in time, based on history, that's where it is. And people are picking their sides of the fence, but more people are picking the other side of the fence, which is Brics now. And Costa Rica in 2008 saved the rest of the world multiple times by being in the middle to do stuff. It's when the oil price went really crazy a long time ago, and they decided they would go between Brazil and the rest of the world to be able to help the prices come down. And in 2008 with CAFTA, so Costa Rica is like the Switzerland of microchips. So as this happens, nobody wants to touch this place. It's a demilitarized zone. So you have the least amount of police officers and military per person in the world, the lowest violent crime rate, most biodiverse place in the world, and a blue zone where people live longer than anywhere else in the world, right? And no nuclear plants. Like you said, these people are watching us, but like you have Plug Power is a hydrogen company that had $1 billion put in twice over within 2 months as a round of capital. So everybody is switching, oil, everything else and so on has had its time, but they're transitioning to biofuels and to hydrogen. The entire world is, and this is not us. If anybody just looks at the numbers, don't look at the emotions, don't look at politics, don't look at what anybody's saying. If you look at all the banks failing, if you look at the debt, you look at the no more debt ceiling for the United States, you just look at all these indicators, and it's just financials. There's just so much falling off the table right now, and something has to replace it, and it's about being self-sufficient. Biofuel and hydroelectric and solar, be able to make it, the least expensive, the most environmentally friendly. This is an open source project. It sounds a little bit altruistic, but I think it's what everybody's looking for, because that's why they're all coming here. It's just basically pulling everybody together and saying, let's create our own self-sustaining community that thrives within a place that is the most friendly in the world for being green, for technology, for biofuel. Now we recognize everybody else doesn't have that, so there's going to be modifications to what are you using for fuel, right? We use coconut oil here too. We use palm oil. It doesn't matter what it is, because what we do is we use the hydrogen and oxygen to up the octane anyway. So if the octane of the fuel is not what's required, then we just add more hydrogen and oxygen to be able to do that. Henry Ford was a hemp farmer, ran 40,000 cars off of 10,000 acres. We're not going back to the future. We're going future to the back. We're becoming low-tech rednecks. Like Google and Facebook and all these guys are registered as integrators. So what you do is we're just integrating best of breed, best of fit of all this stuff and putting it in one place with one project. and make it open source so everybody can put in. Like we have huge high-level people from open source. One of the people is a friend of mine that works for Ubuntu, and he also works for Google and has worked on their Android project and Chrome and search and now open source projects. And now he's helping out. We're getting people from all different levels that are making this a success. And I believe what will make it a success is that it's decentralized, because I think centralized is a poison. That's what nature teaches us, right? So this information is available to anybody and everybody. I sent you a whole bunch of links today. You put those up. That is more than enough for a starter kit for anybody at any community to be able to go and do exactly what we're doing. Our way to monetize and fund this project is really simple. We're open sourcing it, and we're making it so that we can have a 10x reduction in energy costs that's clean, and anybody can do that, and we show you how. Mark Shuttleworth with Ubuntu, which we've worked with in the past and working towards with Africa in the future. So that's what we're trying to do, is go from here, then Africa. Nobody's talking about Africa, but it has the biggest commodity market in the world now. They did the opposite of Brexit, right? What did they do? They used cryptocurrency and translation to be able to turn Africa into one market. The fastest financially growing cities in the world are in Africa. So whatever Africa does, you have more youth there for an economy. So Africa is by far going to dwarf the rest of the world in a very short time period, simply because they just didn't adapt all this other stuff. This is a bit of a trajectory of the world, and it's interesting to see direct delivery from the farm to fork, right to the customers. We're not the only ones. Other communities have connected with us. Other reservations, other communities in Mexico and around the world and Europe, they're doing the exact same thing. They're just disconnecting from the local government, but they're making sure they integrate with the local government from a taxation standpoint so they're relevant, and they integrate with anybody they're trying to displace to make sure that they can make sure they have a stake in it and they can move them forward. And anybody that we're potentially going to be displacing as far as the revenues and stuff and so on, we're making sure we include them and tell them you're getting an upgrade. And this is where the market's going anyway. How can you fight it? There's a transition. Oil's getting more expensive and harder to get. And because of OPEC and the US dollar, the petrodollar is now, looking like it's coming to an end. Then people are going, what are we going to be? In the future, are we going to be Venezuela, or are we going to be Cuba? Well, ideally you're Cuba, right? Because you still have an economy, and you feel you became a you became a MacGyver and a low-tech redneck, and you figured out how to make it work.
Do I hear some sounds in your background there? What is that repeating sound? I know a lot of people are going to ask me the same thing. I hear something out the back. I don't think it's our sheep out here, but I think it's coming from your side. What is that background noise that's repeating about every 10 or 15 seconds? Is that birds, or is it frogs, or what is that? It's going something like that.
It's possibly one of many birds. We have more different types of bird species here than anything else in the world. That's a possibility. One of the weird parts is we're in the middle of a farm with 110 head of cattle and all different types of different livestock, but we don't have bugs. We don't have mosquitoes, because there's mandarin trees all over the place. There's tons of hummingbirds, there's many birds, there's frogs, there's everything. So like here you are in the middle of a farm, right up against the protected rainforest, and you're not being bothered by any bugs at all. It's bizarre. And it's because the Indigenous figured out over 60 years on this property how to integrate stuff with companion plants and technology to make sure that you could be pretty much right up against the rainforest in a cleared area with a bunch of swimming pools and a river, and there's no bugs.
Right. Yeah, because you mentioned a couple things I wanted to respond to here. Like you said, the us against them, or the one country against another nation, or one continent another, or Brics against the non-Brics, whatever. I mean, what we have been the greatest lie to humanity ever told, statism. Like they've sold us that for thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years, that you're in one country and these people over here from a different country, but everybody's a human, a Homo sapiens sapien. So the division from birth, to keep this scam going for multi-millennia, that country over there is the enemy from us over here. And there's that imaginary line, whether it be a river that actually exists, but we'll draw it as a line between states. Statism is that is the largest scam ever perpetrated. Central banking doesn't have that. That's pre-kindergarten compared to statism. Truly it is. And when you said moving over to Africa, I'll actually agree with you on that, because the North African areas and the Sahel, that area has not been developed at all. Pretty much. It's been actually kept off of development on purpose. But we come now to this whole call for reduction of nitrogen, reduction of agriculture. So imagine if you were to set up the new grow zone in North Africa and the Sahel, double rotation crops, and all that investment that could use for, drawing water from the Nubian sandstone aquifer and other aquifers that are there, the Sus aquifer over in Mauritania, all the way up to Morocco, that east or that western edge there of Africa.
Mm-hmm.
Now think about a way to pay people, but also if you were to do a double rotation crop, that area in the North Africa and Sahel region is larger than Canada and the United States combined in the grow zones of how much croplands we have in both of these countries. That area there is larger than that. Now imagine if it comes to these wild globalists get their agenda and they take off all agriculture and they squeeze it into North Africa and Sahel. There's only one area on the planet you're allowed to grow food. There's only one area you're allowed to export it from, and it's all controlled through carbon taxes, universal basic income / central bank digital currency. There's a niche within that niche there, because in the initial build out, how are you going to have some sort of stable coin that's used across the planet that, I don't care where worker you come from, any 200 countries to go there, that same payment system is good wherever you return to in 200 different countries. So something significant is happening in Africa as we speak. Like this whole shift with the Western nations being firewalled off from the rest of the planet. Like you hit a really good point there. And for those of you out there that think, oh, they'll never go away from the US dollar, it's all used across you have to realize that the Western nations only comprise 20%. The other 80% of the world population is in these Brics nations. The rollover point of where the Brics has actually usurped and gone larger than the G7 nations was in the year 2020. That was the rollover year. The Brics nations actually exceeded GDP value globally from the G7 in the year 2020. Scratch my head. What happened in the year 2020 that allowed unlimited money printing with no questions asked for 3 straight years? Gee, I kind of forget. Did anything happen of global significance over those 3 years that would allow never-ending money printing to try to compete with that usurping of what was king dollar? So this whole, distraction of, oh, don't worry about it, don't worry about it, don't worry about it. And all of a sudden one day it'll come crashing down. Oh, we should have worried about it. Sorry, we just had bad info. But why is it that some people see it so clearly and the whole narrative throughout the media is they don't see it clearly? They're actually in the distraction mode.
They've chosen a direction, the whole world has, and they're going that way. And everything ebbs and flows. Everything goes up and down, if you look at history. So that's just where we are. So you got to deal with the cards you're dealt. When you get to that point, we just go, I'm going to deal with the cards that I dealt. And the people that get this, that want to be able to work through this, even people that have had challenges with some of the things that they've done and want to undo them, there are ways if you look hard enough to be able to do that. So if you go looking in history, there was hemp for victory during the war in the United States. They printed the US dollar on hemp. You could pay your taxes in hemp. It was mandatory. And you were told as a farmer, you had to make so much hemp per farm. If you want to be able to look at where things are going today, just look at what happened in the past. We're going exactly the same. The roaring 20s and then the dirty 30s. And today, if you look at the numbers, just the pure numbers, and that's what you're brilliant about. That's why, Greg Braden and, other people like Sid Goldberg, that works at Gaia as one of the producers there type stuff that I introduced you to, right? Everybody's starting to look at you now because they're like, hey, let's get rid of all this he said, she said, and all this emotions, and let's just look at the numbers, because this is getting very serious, right? And the numbers speak for themselves, as long as you want to accept the answer and you want to, give me the wisdom to be able to understand between the things that I can and cannot change, and then the strength to be able to change the things that I can change. Like, that is the most powerful thing I've ever learned in my life. So that's what I see as society from the CNNs of the world, so to speak. Does that make sense?
It does. The fountain of BS overfloweth. And, talking about resources left, I had this very similar conversation with somebody. So you're focusing on the automobiles and the population decline across the planet. Well, I was talking to somebody and said, you know what? I'm thinking about buying a portable Wood-Mizer LT15 sawmill so I could, scrap up my own lumber. In case of grid down, I could create my own lumber. And they looked at me and they go, dude, we go to this grid down kind of thing, and there's going to be massive population loss. You can just go disassemble a house. There're going to be so many homes that will be available for disassembly that nobody will be in. He's like, why would you ever waste your time to mill out the lumber? And your specialty and new skill set you should learn is disassembling homes from screws and nails and mortar and anything that frames and windows. He's like, just disassemble it. There'll be so many homes laying around that are unoccupied that you could go take the building parts from that. And then the whole light bulb went on going, there's going to be a lot of extra stuff laying around. Because in the beginning too, I was buying a lot of, nails, screws, tools. And they were like, yeah, that's a good idea. Because a lot of that stuff you pull out after you disassemble, it'll be bent. But in terms of tools laying around, like how many garages will be, nobody living there, unoccupied, that will have full tool sets and different things that'll be able to just walk in and use yourself because nobody's there. And I said, well, that sounds, like there might be a couple houses in a neighborhood that'll be unoccupied. And the same thing, the realization was, no, bro, it'll be like 1 out of 14 houses will be occupied. There'll be 14 empty houses for every one that has people in it. If it goes down to those numbers from 8 billion to 500 million, even if it was half of that, even if it went from 8 billion to 1 billion, it's still like 1 out of 8 houses would be occupied. So, put into the realization of that. And I was thinking, your prepping takes a whole new line of thought versus longevity of things that if it was a total and everybody was still around at that point and everybody's scrambling and scurrying for resources, that's a different mind frame to get ready for than half the world or 3/4 of the world population disappears and it's all this stuff from 8 billion people still laying around that's going to be usable.
Well, thanks, David, and thanks for making the time. And my grandmother used to say there's no such thing as free advice because you must pay attention. So anybody that feels that they want to be able to stay and continue with the gene pool and to move forward, you just have to be in the right environment. Because here's a really crazy idea. You possibly could be made up of, it's really wild when you tell kids, that stuff you're eating and the water and the air and this electromagnetic field, did you know that within hours or days becomes your actual body, your thoughts, your emotions? Like, what a crazy idea, right? So are you a product of your environment? Absolutely. At the end of the day, if you don't like what's going on, the only way to change human behavior is to ostracize the existing behavior. Anybody can go look this up, go Google it, or DuckDuckGo it, or whatever you want to do. But the only way to change human behavior is to ostracize existing behavior and to be able to create a new one. Gandhi, Buddha, Jesus, whoever it was, show a better story, but show it in action in a better way, and everybody gravitates towards it. I'm just sharing with you that this has happened many times on our planet. So is it likely to happen again? Well, I believe it is. I believe it's happening right as we speak. And most people are not necessarily aware of it.
The world does revolve in cycles, and you wonder how much of this change that we're seeing is because of changes in the magnetic field on the sun that affect human behavior on the planet. And being cyclical, like the sun's magnetic field increases and decreases, well, what you talked about, dragging them out of the capital or out of the castle or the capital or redistributing the wealth, and then that holds state for a while, and then that cycle restarts all over again. I'm really wondering how much of it's affected by magnetic fields in the hemispheres of our brain that are a microcosm of the larger solar system itself. So anyway, I do hope you liked our conversation today. Leave your comments in the description box below. Drew will also take a look at it, get a chance to respond to you. If you think there's something you want to talk about further, I'll leave links and ways for you to make contact. But for now, thank you and have a great day.
Yeah, thanks for making time.
And this podcast has been brought to you by TrueLeafMarket.com. Heirloom and organic seeds for any grow zone on our planet. If you support this kind of content, please visit My Patriot Supply and TrueLeafMarket.com. I appreciate you spending your time with us, and I'll see you next interview.